Good morning, DC. We actually, is it still DC once we cross the water? We actually had this debate over here, and what we decided is that if you could still see the Capitol building, it's DC, right? So we'll go with that. I wanted to start by sharing a quick story about how I actually got to DC. So I came here from New York City, and I was on the train, and there was a man seated next to me, and he struck up a conversation. And he said to me, "So, are you coming to DC for business or pleasure?" And I said, "Business." And he said, "Oh, what kind of business are you doing in DC?" And I said, "Well, I'm a speaker, and I'm speaking at this, National Council for Behavioral Health Conference, the largest of its kind." And he said to me, "Oh, are you a behavioral health expert?" And I said, "No, I'm not." And he said, "Oh." "Are you a mental health expert?" I said, "No, I'm not." And at this point, I could tell from his facial expression, he's like running out of options. So the volume in his voice drops really low, and he looks at me and says, "Are you a patient?" And so I'm going to share with you what I shared with him, and it seemed to work. I said to him, "I am none of those things, but my entire body of work and my voice and everything I do is for the purpose of empowering humanity. And at the core of social work and at the core of trauma work, at the very least, is the empowerment of humanity. So I am honored to be up here in front of all of you whom I deem my colleagues in this quest to empower and inspire humanity and share a story with you that has profoundly changed my life." Before I start there, I wanted to throw something out to all of you. Did you know 75% of all human beings spend most of the day looking down? Let that sit for a minute. 75% of all human beings spend most of the day looking down. Here's what that means. 1 in 4 of you will miss an opportunity to meet your spouse. 1 in 4 of you will miss an opportunity to meet your business partner. 1 in 4 of you will miss an opportunity to save someone's life. We've stopped seeing one another. Every morning, an interesting social paradox plays out all over the world as millions of people board commuter trains and buses. Human beings are one of the most social species on the planet, yet within close proximity of one another, sitting inches away on a train, we routinely ignore each other. Actively stopping to look up has become an accepted behavioral trait. Think about it. Over half of Americans say they would donate a kidney to a stranger, but only 25% will make eye contact with one. It's true, right? Kidney, yep, sign me up, check the box. Eye contact, no. Yet the simple act of making eye contact can profoundly impact a life. Now, a lot of you right now, I can see, are going through that shaming exercise of hiding your devices, and you're recanting how many feeds on Facebook and Instagram you actually scrolled through before you walked in the door here today. But don't worry, I'm here to tell you, the problem isn't Facebook, it's you. So rest assured. Here's what I mean. Social scientists would say that we physically look down because we mentally feel that the world is looking down on us. We carry the weight of our bias for reasons like fear, shame, embarrassment, sadness, or our differences like gender, religion, or sadly even our own self-importance. And let's face it, some of us have convinced ourselves that keeping our heads down is just how we multitask. We actively seek distractions like our devices and even our hands, and I believe we do this because we have a conscious desire to disappear. Clearly, there's reasons we need to look down, like when we practice the art of self-care, when we get a great new pair of shoes. These are pretty good, right? I actually can't see the color of my shoes right now. I actually can't look down. A few months ago, I had impromptu cervical spinal surgery. I point to my neck when I say that because the entry point to your cervical spine is through your throat. Part of my recovery prevents me from looking down, and I'm forced to look up. I can't quite bend, lift, or twist very well, and I was forced to sleep upright at a 90-degree angle, bedridden for 10 weeks in a hard brace. Thank God for Alexa. Now, poor Alexa and technology gets the brunt of all of this, right? So there's a lot of trends that point a finger at technology as to why we look down. But even when we don't have a device in our hands, our bodies still behave as if we do. It's easy to blame technology. But if you start to observe life in a way that I have, you'll see our devices are not the only things that help us become invisible. This gift of being forced to look up, to really see what's happening, has significantly impacted my life. Nobel Prize-winning scientist Daniel Kahneman stated that in any given day, we experience approximately 20,000 individual moments. These moments last seconds in which our brain records an experience. Now, on average, we walk about 5,000 steps per day. That means that in any given day, with every step we take, we have the opportunity to experience roughly 4 individual moments, some of which can change our life. I experienced a moment like this a year ago during my marathon. Any marathoners out there? A few, yes. So you know that running a marathon is an incredibly solitary experience, right? Eye contact seems optional in this sport. I was ignorant to think that such an insular mental process negated the need for external connection to cross the finish line. And where I needed it, mile marker 19. Now, every marathoner knows that once you've run 20 miles nonstop, things just start to break down. Nothing in that moment works. Gatorade, Beyonce, nothing. Your body literally starts to break down. It's where the infamous phrase hitting a wall was actually derived. The place where fighting the mental demons to quit and the will to continue seem insurmountable. And I was in it, deep. Every ounce of support from a Fitbit to cowbells just started to annoy me and chip away. I was quickly running out of options. At around mile 20, within all that noise, I looked up from my purple sneakers. A 6-year-old boy came into focus. He was quiet, shy, a little unsure of himself, unlike anyone else on the street. He was holding a sign that read "Free High Fives" and sheepishly extended his little hand. Unconsciously, I ran over to him, took him up on his offer, and brushed his hand. It was like receiving a vitamin shot. I could literally feel the dopamine flood my body. It pushed me, and I crossed the finish line. That connection from another human being in that moment was more powerful than any energy bar, more powerful than Gatorade, and it was from a total stranger. That little boy had no concern for my political viewpoint, gender, race, religion. He just extended his hand of help because he thought I needed support. He forever changed me and reminded me, when our view isn't burdened by our differences, we can see possibilities. In that moment of feeling lost and uncertain, having one person see me made all the difference in my ability to cross the finish line. And every single one of us in this room today has that power. The simple act of making eye contact increases oxytocin, builds trust. Giving someone a high five releases dopamine, gives us a high and kills pain. Smiling releases endorphins. lowers stress. All of these are simple, free, yet powerful social signals that not only trigger this magnanimous brain activity, but most importantly, creates a sense of inclusion. Here's why that matters. In adolescence, inclusion is associated with a higher GPA. In adults, inclusion is the #1 reason that people choose to stay at their jobs. Your teams, your staff, all of you stay where you are because you feel like you're part of something, because you feel like you're included. And the Journal of Psychological Science found in a study that a sense of inclusion can come from something as simple as eye contact from a perfect stranger. Yet still, the vast majority of us will actively choose to look down. When we give power to our bias and look down, we become blind to moments of possibilities. I started to have conversations and conduct research within populations who self-identify with isolation from looking down. Recovering addicts, inmates at correctional facilities, deployed military, and even high school and college freshmen. Those populations who have stopped being seen. I was teaching a class at Columbia University, and 2 of the questions I asked of the students were: 1, when someone you know needs help, how do you help them? And 2, when someone you don't know needs help, do you? One of the students raised his hand and he said, I actually helped someone I didn't know, and it forever changed my life. He shared with me this story. He said that he and his friends were walking out of school one day in the suburbs of Connecticut where they're from. They've walked down that street countless times. They grew up together, went to grade school together, but this time it was different. They weren't alone. There was a little boy who was sitting by himself on the curb. He was described to me as a bit of a loner, a burnout. They could tell he was going through something from afar, but what they didn't know. The boys gave each other a look. You know that look where everyone is thinking the same thing without saying a word? They walked over to the little boy, and this student had the courage to say the first words, and he said to him, hey, whatever it is, it's all right. It'll be over soon. The little boy on the curb looked up and just stared. He was speechless. The boys gave him a pat on the back and a high five. The boy nodded, they walked away. The next day in school, that boy on the curb bravely walked over to their table in the cafeteria and he said, hey, I just wanted to say thanks for coming over to me yesterday. Ah, no problem, man, the boys replied. He said, no, you don't understand. When you guys came over to me, I was contemplating suicide. Because of you, well, I didn't do it. The boys just looked up and stared. This time, they were speechless. After school that day, those boys walked over to that curb and took a picture and made it their screensaver because they had never experienced something like that in their lives. And they wanted to remember. 2 years later, to this day, it's still their screensaver because they never want to forget. In a world where 1 in 10 boys will experience depression by the time they're 14, and for girls, 1 in 4, the Journal of Adolescence found that when teens develop what they call prosocial behaviors, compassion, sharing, kindness towards strangers, simply looking up and seeing someone they otherwise wouldn't, developed higher self-esteem within 1 year. Just being seen illuminates human potential. Choosing to stay in your jobs, choosing to stay on this earth, choosing to love yourself. These greatest moments begin with the smallest moment. These moments last seconds, and then they're gone. What if we took 5 seconds out of our day to recognize another person or another thing we otherwise wouldn't. A colleague at work, someone on your commute, someone when you walk into a conference room back at work tomorrow, someone when you walk out of the hallway at this conference today. A simple look, a smile, an extension of your hand, 5 seconds to let someone know, I see you. Think about how that would change your organization. Think about how that would change your culture. Think about how that would change you as leaders. When I started this journey to unlock the power that exists in our hands, my own hand stopped working, and eventually my entire arm. What I initially thought was a hand injury ended up being my cervical spine. Neurological damage prompted the need for immediate surgery, and in a matter of days, my view was changed. But I'm blessed. My injury, thankfully, will heal. I'll be able to look down. I'm choosing not to. These moments are all around us, and there is one that will be yours. That 6-year-old little boy won't always be standing on the side of the road holding a sign, waiting for us to look up. Accepting the standard of looking down is counter to the time we live in. We live in a time to be visible. And every single one of us here have a choice. The need to inoculate ourselves from this cultural epidemic of looking down is right now. Thank you.